Look at that. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Silicon Slope Show. Welcome to Thursday. Next week, this show will change somewhat into, we'll talk about it on next week.
Sure.
Who cares? Why don't I talk about it now? It's Thursday.
It's just, I think they call that a teaser.
All right. Oh, my gosh. We're off to a great start. We actually have a great guest today. We have Shane Evans, who's the Chief Revenue Officer at Gong. You led global sales at Qualtrics.
I did.
Which is incredible.
It was fun.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Great ride.
What a run. And you were also interim CEO and president at MX, which is interesting, which I'd love to get into. But tell us about Gong.
So Gong, for those of you that don't know, our mission is to unlock the potential of revenue teams. And that's a broad umbrella for helping to make revenue professionals' lives easier. The premise for the company, the founder was a CEO of a company, and they had recently gone public and had their whole beat and raise game put together. And second quarter in, it got off tracks real quick. And so he was going around asking everybody, what happened? How did this occur? A bunch of hypothetical answers, but no one had the data. And so he said, there's got to be a better way for us to understand what's going on with our customers and what the reality is. And that's what led to Gong. And they started doing call recording and capturing information, contextual interactions. Think of phone calls, meetings and video, emails, text messages, any interaction to really understand what's happening every day and using that to drive better decisioning. And one of the things that's been super interesting for me as a revenue leader for 25 plus years, one of the biggest challenges I've faced, I've had to threaten, coerce, try and bribe sellers and customer success folks to put data into a database. And I've tried everything. And I've many times have felt like the biggest enemy, public enemy number one, because that's information I need to run the business.
Yeah.
And yet over time, what I've realized, Forrester just came out with some data that estimates that about 1% of the contextual data is actually represented in a CRM. And so you have a 30-minute meeting, you exchange 50, 60,000 words, about 50 of them make it into the CRM, and it ends up being things like, awesome meeting, this deal's for sure going to close. Great data that you can actually make decisions off of. And so that was the premise for Gong. And that's what's been interesting is that, we're eight years into the journey, and AI has become the rage and the mainstream. But really what we're doing is helping companies capture information, marry that up with business data, and then be able to make much better decisions. And so it's just great timing. You see these windows open up for companies, and we feel like it's a great window for us right now, and it's been a lot of fun.
So are you automating the what's being put into the CRM in a way? Like how does it work? Like so I'm thinking of like Fireflies or some of these other like AI note takers that always appear on my Zoom call, but I have no idea where that ever goes.
Yep.
It's crazy.
Because all we do is say, good call. I think they'll be in.
I have no idea why we have an AI note taker on my calls ever. I have no idea where they go, what they're doing. I've never read one in my life. I couldn't log into it.
So here's the cool part. If you think about any sales process or customer success methodology, you're usually looking for information about what occurred, and you want to capture that. If you're a fan of MEDIC, which is a sales methodology to do deal inspection, stands for, metric, economic buyer, decision process. We can identify that on the call and automatically suck it into a database. And so now when it comes time to do some deal reviews or to look at what could go better, we're not relying upon people to do the activity capture. It's happening automatically. I go to meetings all the time with other executives. We sit down. Last week I was at Gartner, and we were doing in the casino, all the background noise, and I pop out my mobile phone and do the capture. I don't have to take notes. All of my team that want to know, hey, what happened in that meeting, they can just listen to the call. And it gives us recommendations of as far as follow-up actions. Here's what was agreed to. Here's what you need to do next based on all the other contextual information. And so we're trying to give people time back to actually do what they're there to do, which is engage with prospects and customers. And so when we talk about like unlocking the potential of revenue teams, it really is giving them the freedom and the information they need to be much better at their job.
That's cool.
Do you have to tell people that these are recorded? I don't even know that.
Yeah, which is interesting. So you mentioned, my stint at MX when I was president and interim CEO. I actually became a Gong customer. We purchased Gong. And so think about, we're selling to banks, credit unions, financial data. There was a lot of concern and worry about, will people actually allow us to capture calls?
Yeah.
And it was a non-issue. In this day and age, I think a lot of companies expect calls to be recorded. We have a number of financial service customers today that actually can receive heavy fines if they do things or say things incorrectly. And so we're able to give them a guide and be able to monitor, hey, did someone say something that you need to proactively go back and correct so you don't get yourself into trouble?
Yeah.
And so it's fun to see that even in very highly regulated industries, it's becoming the norm and it's expected. And I think that's where we're heading right now, capture of everything.
And it's probably really uncomfortable for most people to be like, oh, great, we just have Big Brother, right? Like, I think that's a natural, visceral reaction. But once you get through it of like, all right, this is recorded. I got to be on my best behavior / I got to like do everything that the CRO asked me to do.
Yeah.
It might take a couple of months before you're like, oh, okay, we're good.
There's definitely a change management component here, as with any modern technology, where as an executive, before we implemented Gong, this is before I joined the company, I went around to all of the executive team and said, hey, here's what we're going to do. And if anyone uses this information to put anyone on the stand to prosecute them, you will lose access to that information, because we're trying to give our team tools to help them be better.
Yeah.
And then I went back and told the team that, and I was blown away. What ended up happening is our product leaders, our finance leaders, all asked for access to the data because they wanted to hear what customers are saying. There's too much he said, she said, or getting information third party. And so by them having access to it, they don't have to guess anymore.
Yeah.
And you can imagine in our current environment, you're relying upon individuals to take information and represent it back to you. A lot of times there's bias in that based on what they heard, what they wanted to hear. We've got the happy ear syndrome. Yeah. And so now we get it undiluted. And we're able to look at that over multiple interactions, not just one, and multiple deals, multiple companies, which makes it really actionable and really accurate. And so it's making business a lot more fun because it takes a lot of the guesswork and the uncertainty out and allows us to be much more intelligent and much more focused on what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, this is incredible, actually. Your site is unbelievable. So you guys are you're in Israel, you're in Dublin, you're in Chicago, you're in Atlanta, you're in San Francisco, and you're in Utah.
Salt Lake City.
Where was it started?
So the company was founded in San Francisco. The two founders are Israeli. And so we have a large research and development organization. So think of like product engineering are housed in Tel Aviv, which is fascinating. I've had a chance to spend quite a bit of time there with the team, which has been fun.
What about recently? Have you been there recently?
I've tried.
Yeah,
it's challenging as of late. And not so much because airlines aren't flying, just the cost has gone up considerably.
Sure.
And so what's been very interesting is that region has been dealing with this situation for centuries. And I've been blown away. We've not skipped a beat as far as delivery, as far as commitment. Our ELT team, it's one of the most highly functioning ELT team I've worked with. They're committed to coming together. So once a quarter, we're in person. We pick different cities that make it accommodating for everybody. And we meet up and we engage. And it's been fascinating.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? That Israel is like the fact that they can just business as usual during, nonstop conflict. And now like a full-blown, the entire world is looking at you conflict is crazy. Their tech scene and their startup and venture capital scene is as good as anybody's in the world. It doesn't get talked about enough. That's a world-class tech community. Yeah.
Well, they've got a lot of practice, right? They've had
every
border and every gun pointed at them since 1948. So they don't have, I don't think they're big on excuses. Right? Like, no, we're going to stop for 3 weeks because there was a siren.
Business as usual.
Yeah.
It's been fascinating.
Because there was a siren. This is incredible. So tell us about the growth of this company and like, where is it going? Like this company's going to go public at some point.
We'll see. We've actually shifted the narrative just with all the market uncertainty right now. It's really hard to make a plan around going public. And so we've tried to focus our sights on, let's get to $1 billion in ARR. Let's build a great company, and everything else will take care of itself. We were talking earlier about, any recent raises. The company is very well funded. We've got plenty of capital in the war chest. We haven't needed to raise money, and we've been very efficient and as we've been building. And so it allows a lot of options, and there's no rush.
Yeah.
The founders, are not spring chickens by any stretch, and yet they've done very well. And so it's been fascinating to work with individuals that are very experienced and very patient. And so you get a chance to do a lot of different A/B testing and try different things and see what's going to work. So it's like being in the lab in so many ways. It reminds me a lot of the journey that I had at Qualtrics, where we just tested so many different things and learned in the lab, as opposed to having an existing playbook that we were trying to operate from. And so you can imagine it makes it very fun, because you're not having to subscribe to a certain playbook. You're not having to march to a set sheet of music. You actually get to go and be an author and a creator, and it makes it a lot of fun.
Yeah.
That's cool. Tell us about the Qualtrics journey, what it was like being there, what it was like leading sales. At what point was it clear, like, man, we're really on to something? Was it around the time you guys just made up a whole category called experience management and it took off like crazy? Like, at what point was it like, holy crap, this is even bigger than we thought?
So what's interesting is when you're on the ride, it never feels like, oh, this is going to be huge. When you're in the vehicle, you're rolling down the street, it feels like at any moment everything's going to implode. You're going too fast. You're taking on too much weight in the vehicle. You got people hanging out of the vehicle. It's not safe. And yet that's what makes it so exhilarating and fun. Mm-hmm. And I just have an immense amount of gratitude for the Smith family. There's really like a club there and what they were able to do. And to Ryan's credit, the vision was always there. Like, Ryan always would talk about where we were going to be and remind us where we didn't want to be, which was in the basement. You know, it was just so hard in the beginning. And so it was always just moving forward. And I don't think any of us in the moment, except for maybe, you know, Ryan and Jared had the great run at Google. And
Mm-hmm.
there's so much that he brought from like a structural and a framework perspective. I'll tell you, there's been so many moments in reflecting back where you think about building a high-performing team and hiring people. And Jared had a lot of ideas that he was influenced from Google that he had brought over. In the moment, it was so frustrating because we were trying to hire people and he had this incredibly high bar. And yet, looking back, in so many ways, I've become a version of Jared as I've built a high-performing team and making sure that we spend our time in trying to get it right so that you don't have to deal with performance issues and don't have to deal with people that may not be the right mutual fit. You're not the right fit for them and they're not the right fit for you. And so on the journey, there's so many learnings that you're not even realizing that are coming about. And it isn't until years later and you reflect back, you're like, wow, that was very helpful to have to go through those hard times, those challenges. You also realize that how important it is to have a vision and to just stick to it. And I have so much respect for founders because you've got to be the one that has the intestinal fortitude and keep pushing through and be willing to see what can be manifested. And you got people at every turn doubting, like, can we actually do this? Will we be able to? And so to your question, I don't remember a single moment where we were like, oh, this is going to be a company that exits the first time for $8 billion and the second time for 20 plus billion and the third time. Like, it just, I don't think anyone had that realization. You just had an incredibly talented team that were committed to getting it right and just working their tails off. And that's what made it fun. And the learning that comes is like compressed into this accelerated timeline that you have no idea in the moment of what you're experiencing. And it isn't until you get out of it that you look back and you're like, wow.
Yeah.
I could tell you so many stories of moments where I thought, oh man, like this is going to crash and burn. Like this is going to go up in flames. I remember multiple conversations that we would have of, oh boy, is this it? And yet you look back and you're like, oh man, that was a blip.
Yeah.
Which is really helpful to have that experience. Now you come to a company like MX or Gong or wherever where you're trying to really build something great and you got to have that long-term view and understand that challenges are going to come. It's not the end of the world and you'll get through it, especially if you have good people and a good team. Now, I think Ryan had a totally different view of what was going on because he was looking out the windshield and what was going to be. And for him, the whole time it was, right? And so now you're getting I was in a different seat in the vehicle, you know, kind of peeking over people's shoulders and head down most of the time. But it was a ton of fun and just an immense amount of gratitude for having the opportunity to have been part of it. It was a blast.
Yeah. So you leave Qualtrics. By the way, how are you thinking about how he's doing since? Like he's out of Qualtrics now, as I understand it, and doing jazz, doing hockey, probably trying to get baseball, probably trying to take over the world, become like president of Utah. He is president of Utah. How do you? What's it like watching him now?
It's like seeing it done all over again in a completely different arena. And people that haven't been able to watch it don't understand it. They think it's a bunch of like, no plan or just like here and there and everywhere, but there is symmetry to where it's going. And you don't get lucky multiple times over. It's, I remember sitting down with him and asking him on the first exit, like, hey, so now what? He's like, what do you mean now what? Like, I'm a grinder. Like, I'm just going to keep grinding. And I remember having a similar conversation with his wife, Ashley. Like they that's just how they operate. And so watching him and what he's doing right now, like he's got a plan, he's got a team that he's assembled, and he's doing incredible things for Utah. So how can you not sit back and just watch with admiration, respect, and excitement around what's happening? And as a huge fan of Utah, for so many other reasons, I love it, and nothing but cheer and admire what's going on and hope that it continues down that track. It's making our community so much better. So
he's not someone you bet against, and his passion and love for Utah is unmatched.
Yeah,
he really, really loves this state. So you leave Qualtrics. What led you to MX and being the interim CEO?
So what led me to MX, I was actually really interested in working for a Bay Area tech company when I was doing my investigation. And I met Ryan Caldwell and Brandon DeWitt. And if you spend any time with either of those individuals, they're the founders of MX, for those that don't know. MX is a fintech that is helping to aggregate financial data that will allow people to live better lives. And just an incredibly mission-driven company, and was mesmerized by the two of them and the vision that they had. Larger than life again, and another Utah-based company. And I thought, wow, chance to work for two companies in my backyard that make it a lot of fun. And there's a very, very, very long story that's just heartbreaking in this one. Brandon DeWitt, for those that don't know, had a long bout with cancer. At one point, he was diagnosed and given literally 90 days to live. And the engineering team at MX and Ryan Caldwell, they went and used code to identify every possible experimental trial that would extend his life. And then they hopped on a plane and went and met with 40 different trials and got into 2. And one of them, the second one, ended up extending his life about 7 years. And so when I joined the company, it was as CRO. And then they asked me to take on a role as president. And within a 30-day period, Brandon passed away. He lost his fight against cancer, and I was very, very close with him, and that was just gut-wrenching.
He was a great man.
Amazing.
Very good man.
And then Ryan Caldwell, I don't know how this happens, that tragedy strikes so close, but Ryan Caldwell has just an incredible story where he has a daughter that had some issues health-wise and went to the hospital and was misdiagnosed, and it led to an incredibly challenging road for he and his wife Treasure in some of the heart conditions that she was facing. And her life was in the balance multiple times. Mm-hmm. And so Ryan faced another hurdle with Chloe, his daughter. And so within a 30-day period, we lost Brandon, and then Chloe's situation flared up, and so he had to leave the business. And I was asked to step in as interim CEO while they did a search for the next leader. And so, I mean, that's taken, 3.5, 4 years, and just kind of like wrapping it up into how that came to be. Was never looking to be the CEO. My ambitions have always been about where can I learn and grow the most. It's not about titles or responsibility. It's where can I get an opportunity to really refine myself and continue to learn new things. And that was definitely an opportunity to be thrust into a role to learn something new. You imagine losing 2 founders and the vision that they had and the way that they had been the soul of the company. Definitely, it was a challenging time and a lot of accelerated growth again, but a great ride.
Yeah.
I love Ryan Caldwell, loved Brandon, and I just think the world of both of them, and I can't imagine, when he was going through all that, I couldn't even imagine it. It was crazy.
But you talk about it perspective. Brandon had all these DeWitt-isms that he would coin and phrase, and I think
I have a hat or a shirt that says "Just do it," or
Yep.
"Just do it."
Just DeWitt.
Just do it. Yeah,
So playing on the Mountain Dew, just do it. Just DeWitt.
Yeah.
He had another one, do good, be good. Every day is a gratitude day. You talk about a guy that every day he wakes up, and he was going to chemo weekly. And every day it was like his life was in the balance. And so the perspective that you receive from working in the trenches with someone like that it changes your complete outlook, where you look at life totally differently. Like everything that seems to matter just kind of dissipates, and you get really focused on people, which is what Brandon did. And everyone he touched, it made a massive difference.
Absolutely. What's MX up to nowadays?
Grinding, like still building, trying to get data aggregation figured out. Right now you've got a whole movement around open banking, and there's a big new way to trade currency around pay by bank. And so they continue to build out connections to ensure that they can actually bring all that data together. And you look at the challenge that we face, not just in our country, but globally around the financial system. It is so dated. It is way past due for an overhaul. And so there's just tons of opportunity. And so they're continuing to innovate and build in a way to make it easier to trade money, for individuals to actually get grapple on their personal financial lives and be able to use that information, another data play, to be able to make better decisions and better manage their financial lives.
When we started this interview, you were talking about being a CRO and getting the folks lined up, and you said coercing, and I don't know if you used the word threatening, but like, come on, guys, cajoling. It really reminds me of, I think it was The Art of Intelligence, Alan Dulles, one of the CIA directors, and there's since been a couple that have played off of that, of these deputy directors or CIA directors where they're just begging. They have to go up one level to the White House, but then it's down throughout the whole world of, hey, we need better information. And why did you guys not share that? It used to be paper files. Then it was like digital, and they're like, why did we miss that, right? And it was just frustration throughout the whole book. And, they're pretty good at it and have been, but it didn't come easy. And it related to what you were saying of, come on, where is this? Like, I know you just had a 30-minute conversation. How do you guys optimize this information as it pertains to the bottom line?
Yeah, great question. So it's usually not a shortage of data.
Yeah.
But where there is a shortage, we talked about this, is contextual data. And what I mean by contextual is like, what are the words actually that are exchanging hands and being traded back and forth? Most of the sales tech stack today is based on activity. And what I mean by that is you're logging emails that you sent, you're logging meetings that you've had, you're logging activity. And so most of the predictions or the insights are based on activity. And this goes back decades where we've been using call sheets to actually tick, hey, did my team actually have a call? The difference with Gong is we actually capture all the contextual information, and then we marry that up with all the business performance data.
Okay.
So think of like, are you actually hitting your numbers? Are you actually creating pipeline? Are you advancing pipeline? Is the market segment that you're focused on actually resulting in progress? But then you have the contextual data to marry that with. And so now we're able to tell you what are the behaviors, what are the words that are actually being used that are effective? How is your story being told in a way that's actually manifesting with a connection? So a lot of companies talk about product market fit. You think about message fit. You think about sales interaction or retention and implementation interaction that fits. So much of that is contextual. And so being able to figure out what's working, we take all that information and then we use language models to then distill down and interpret and understand what's actually happening and give people insights back. The real powerful piece is the ability to take certain phrases, certain topics, and be able to net down on those. So I'll give you an example. When I joined Gong, the company had been growing so rapidly that there wasn't much thought given to longer term engagements. Like the majority of our engagements were like 12 months. And so we needed to push our engagements out to multi-year. So I was able to create an initiative around a multi-year initiative. Anytime any topic was mentioned around term, around how long we want to be engaged with each other, we were able to net down on that and understand what certain folks were doing differently than others. And then in real time, be able to come back and give coaching and insight and recommendations automatically to the team in the field so they could use that. And we have seen about an 80% increase in the number of multi-year deals we've been able to do. So I'm taking a very tactical example, but that's how it works. You take all the interaction data, you then use that to drive forward. You got companies like Upwork, who's a customer today, public company. They're really struggling with getting predictable information out there. We've been able to take that contextual information and not make it based on activities. Like, did you submit your forecast?
Mhm.
Again, this goes back to my days as a CRO when I was threatening people. Like,
Yeah.
hey, if you don't give me this information, we're going to have problems. And I tried bribes. I tried everything under the sun. But now I don't need to. I can actually look at the contextual information on that opportunity and know, do we have a legitimate opportunity? I can ask an open-ended question of, why will we lose this deal? Or what will give us the best chance to win this deal? Or if I'm going into an exec-to-exec alignment call, like I'm going to go sit down with the CEO, I can actually ask them, what do I need to know about this deal? And it gives me a summarized list. And so you think about the time that saves. Before, an AE and their leader, an account executive and a regional vice president would have to sit down and spend 3 to 4 hours on putting together an account summary to get me downloaded, spend another 45 minutes telling me what I can and can't say. And then that's about 5 hours of time. Now I'm able in a number of like 3 minutes to ask the system what I need, and it gives me a download, and I can walk into that meeting fully prepped. And so we can ask it anything. It can give us guidance, and every day it becomes even more intelligent, more accurate with what's happening with a lot of these AI models and tools that are being developed ongoing. It's a great time to be a revenue leader if you have the right information to do your job more effectively.
Yeah. Very interesting. So that's like on the tactical level. And then you've got like open source data. Like when SVB had their issue on our sponsorship calls, that would have been an indicator, right? Like that has nothing to do with you guys, but they were puckered, right? And that was going to eventually affect our revenue. Do you guys pull open source data of like interest rates or calamities, those types of things that will influence?
So what's being done right now is fascinating. If you look at even some of the large telecom companies, they're looking at market trends, competitive trends, public reports. So now the data that becomes available allows you to use that in real time if you so choose. It's giving companies the ability to be more intelligent, but this is where the people aspect becomes so critical. There's a lot of talk right now about jobs going away. A lot of talk.
Yeah.
It's not here. People need better information. And that's not me trying to extend our life. Like, we're not seeing roles being eliminated in revenue because of technology. We're seeing people being amplified and being able to do their job better. And so the inputs, you talk about like market and competitive and financial data. Yes, like that, those are all inputs that should be factored into the model, but every company is going to use that differently.
Yeah.
Some companies are doing AI and they're putting wrappers around their sales tech stack, and they're doing it based on 1% of the contextual data. So you can imagine the accuracy and the effectiveness and the ability for companies to be able to be intelligent, they're going to be severely limited. Then we talk about adding contextual data, the point you just made about adding market and competitive and economic. It just allows us to be better in our jobs in a way that we just aren't able to do today.
Yeah. I can just envision, I'll always use this example, John Deere, right? They're selling a lot of tractors to the implement shops in Iowa and Illinois, but for whatever reason, things aren't going well in Nebraska. And even like the data point of weather would be very interesting on that one, right?
100%.
And they're like, well, they've had 2 years of drought. They don't need a $400,000 combine. But the sales team could probably tweak and re-engineer like, okay, we'll implement some different financing, or maybe it's 7-year payoff instead of 4, that type of stuff.
What's fun is that it ends up impacting the entire supply line. And so when you use data the right way, you then know as a engineer, as a developer, as a product leader, you can hear what's happening with customers. You can see trends in the data and then be able to respond to that. Whereas before it was very much lagging data, where, to use the old analogy, you're looking out the rearview mirror, trying to understand like what happened in the past and use that as a way to predict what's happening in the future. Now you can look out the windshield. And by having that additional information, that additional data, it allows you to be much more effective in your day-to-day.
Yeah. Interested in how you work with the other executives on the team.
Yeah, that's a good one. So I was very fortunate early in my career. I was working for a payments company, and I was going to school, and I started as a collector. And great job, by the way. Like, you want to go and you want to go earn your money. You can work a limited time, and if you're effective, if you're good at collections, you can make really good money. And so I worked at night, and then during the day I'd go to school. And as I continued that education journey, I had a chance to go into customer success. And then I noticed at that point that the people that were working in sales had a little bit more freedom with their schedule, made what seemed to be a lot more money, and we're jumping on planes and doing all sorts of stuff. And I was about to graduate, and I thought, you know what, I want to go into sales. And I went to our CEO and I expressed the interest, and she said to me, she's like, look, I'll give you that option if you'll take a 6-month stint in operations. And at the time I was like, Chris, I don't know anything about ops. Like, I'm not your guy. And she said she had seen something where she thought I could do that. And it was a deal that we made. And at the time I was like lamenting, but I did the job. For 6 months, I was our operations leader while we did a search and had a chance to get to know that side of the business. And what ended up happening, by the time I got into sales, I knew every element of our operation, front house to back house, like front to back. And so when I go out to have conversations with customers, not only did I know how everything worked, I had all the relationships. And so I hit the ground running, not even realizing how beneficial that was going to be in working in all those different teams and departments. And so that, at a very early stage in my career, taught me you can't succeed unless the ecosystem knows you and trusts you. And you also can't succeed unless you really know how the operation works. Like, you can't look at a few training videos and read a few marketing slicks and think, hey, I got it. Yeah. You got to know. And so as I progressed in my career, and by the way, I've made so many mistakes. I've gone into companies thinking, hey, I know the answers here. Like, I don't need that executive to be successful, only to be burned by not having a really good relationship. And a lot of business is about emotional intelligence. Like, can you relate to and understand people and help build this team dynamic? And so throughout my career, you recognize and you learn that you can't get anything done without having the entire ecosystem working with you. And the bigger the company, the more challenging that can be, and the more is going to determine, like, can you succeed? And so it's actually something that we talk a lot about today as we're going through significant growth of how we help coach our teams to work well cross-functionally.
Yeah.
It's a life lesson. It's something that I had a chance to get a taste of it early, and then I've had a chance to stub my toe and learn as I've gone throughout my career.
I want to weave in a little anniversary to that answer. I love the answer. 80th anniversary of D-Day.
Yes. And
for anyone that's ever read or understood that, like, I guarantee all those generals would have loved them some Gong, right? But they were all really good at, like, putting, you know, their 1-star, 2-star generals over into operations or intelligence for 6 months to a year leading up to D-Day.
Yep.
So that they could relate to each other. Navy, Army, intelligence, supplies, logistics. Because you could just sit there and yell into the wind, where is everything? Where are the bullets and beans? If you've never been on that side of things, you can't relate. So even, you know, without modern technology, like, those principles were applied and those endure forever.
Yeah, great point, and such a great acknowledgement of the anniversary, and so many great lessons that apply to business today around people and working well with teams. You know, when you hear about these stories of heroes and great things that people have accomplished and different medals and awards they've won, it usually overshadows or doesn't quite do justice to the people that either touched their life or that were there with them to allow that to occur. And it's a good time for us to acknowledge that and give thanks and gratitude back for those individuals that lost their lives or contributed immensely to make that possible.
Yeah.
Can you imagine D-Day? Oh my gosh.
Oh my gosh.
Being in one of those U-boats. My word.
Yeah.
Did you know Hitler had been up way late that night, super drunk, reminiscing on, like, the glory days of the party? And so he didn't find out until, like, hours after it happened that he's about to get destroyed.
Yep. Oh, it's millions and millions of hours of interesting stories with that one.
Absolutely.
And, you know, those boys, there's a few over there now today, and they're at a minimum 97, but there's a lot of 102-year-olds. And it's fun to watch, like, people's facial reactions when they see these guys that were actually there and doing it. Won't happen again.
Let's hope.
Yeah.
Let's hope.
Yeah. Hey, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Best of luck with everything. You've got a monster of a company on your hands.
We'll see. We got a lot of work to do. And like I said, you're in the vehicle and it's rattling quite a bit. And by the way, thank you guys for what you're doing for Utah. Silicon Slopes is a real thing. And we've got so much potential here in the state. The tech community is exploding and the stories continue to come. I was reminiscing the other day thinking, you know, what companies are going to be the next big ones that come that are
Yeah.
being started right now. And you guys give the airtime to those founders and help them get their stories out. And it's always inspiring. So thank you for what you're doing for the community. It means a lot.
Oh,
Thank
thanks,
you.
man. Well,
Appreciate it.
Ryan played a huge role in that and
Absolutely.
continues to. Like he was a big part of this organization, still is. Hey, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
Seriously,
Good to
that
spend
was
time with you
incredible.
guys. Appreciate it.
We'll be back on Monday, and we'll talk about that format then.
Okay.
How about that?
Yep. Can't wait.